Hello everyone, my name is Michael and I am the Director of Product Management at Apprenda. In this video, I will show you Apprenda's integration with a key development lifecycle solution by Microsoft, Team Foundation Server or TFS for short, and demonstrate our powerful Better Together story. During the course of this presentation, I will be making an assumption that you're familiar with Apprenda, our core capabilities, our integration with Visual Studio, and the Apprenda software development kit. As a refresher, I recommend the Apprenda 5.0 webinar that is on our website, as well as some of the other Microsoft and Apprenda presentations. We have heard from many of our customers that they wanted to be able to leverage investments in TFS for automated builds of their Apprenda applications. One possible scenario here is that I have an Apprenda application that I'm developing and I would like to build it nightly using TFS. As part of the build process, I would like to have Apprenda take the latest build of my application, deploy it on the platform, create a new version for it, and put the new version in a sandbox stage, and allow me to run automated unit tests against that build. This process can of course repeat itself on a nightly basis until I am ready to publish the latest version of my app. In this video, I will walk you through the process of setting all of this up. First, let's talk about the few ingredients necessary to make this scenario happen. I will describe each one in detail as you go through the presentation. We have our Apprenda application, the Apprenda software development kit or Apprenda SDK, the Apprenda workflow activity for TFS, the TFS build process template, and the TFS build definition. The first one, our Apprenda application, is what you're viewing here on your screen. Here we have an app called Timecard TFS that's in a published stage. So that means we can create new versions of this application and put them in sandbox. The second part, what we talked about, is the Apprenda SDK. One of the prerequisites is that the Apprenda SDK is installed on every TFS build server that will be building Apprenda applications. There is an alternative though, which is what I followed for this demo, and that is to check into TFS acs.exe, which is one of the binaries in the Apprenda SDK in a folder that you can reference easily in TFS. Here I have the custom activity assemblies folder that's part of my TFS tree, and I have included here acs.exe, which is part of our Apprenda SDK. Actually, all four of the top DLLs here and executables and binaries are going to be very important for this TFS integration process. Apprenda build activity comprises all the code for the Apprenda workflow that allows Apprenda to integrate with TFS. The Contoso build extension and the TFS build template with apprenda.xaml are the two files that contain the exact workflow process for building my application and following all the necessary steps to make sure that the binaries are built, published, and pushed to the right servers, as in your build file servers for consumption. And acs.exe is the binary we just mentioned earlier that's part of the Apprenda SDK. Now I put all of these files in this custom activities assemblies folder, and I put it in my TFS tree path. And you can notice here, if I go to TFS under my Source Control Explorer, I'll notice that I do have the same folder under my TFS environment and that everything is checked in, but that is not enough. What we need to do here is to modify the build controllers for TFS to make sure that they know how to find a folder for custom assemblies. So let's go ahead and look at the properties of the TFS controller here, and you notice that we've given it the path to custom assemblies, where it includes both the XAML file as well as the DLL for the workflow process for our build. Let's go ahead and cancel out of these windows here. As the first step to create a nightly build is to create a build definition as well as a new build workflow. So let's get started on that. First, let's go ahead and create a brand new project in Visual Studio, which is a workflow activity library. I'm going to call it TFS Demo Workflow 1. I'm going to make sure that it's added to source control, and we're creating a new directory solution for it, and it's all going to be under our TFS path here. If we look at the Solution Explorer, we notice that it created an activity1.xaml file, but it's empty. It doesn't really contain anything. As an organization that's been working on TFS over the years and improving our build processes, I really do have my own build definition and my own build workflow that I have already pre-populated as part of building other applications. So I would like to leverage it here. In order to do that, I need to go ahead and create a brand new build definition so I can extract the XAML file from it. I'm going to call it TFS Demo Workflow 1 definition and go to the process area here, where it will go and scout TFS for all the known build process templates. I want you to notice here that one of the build process templates that you will find is the very template that we have in this custom activities assemblies, which is the TFS build template with Apprenda. For the purposes of the beginning of this exercise, I'm not going to go ahead and choose that, but what I will choose is the default template of my organization. I'm going to go ahead and download that, and I'm going to put it in the folder that we created for the demo workflow 1, and I'm going to call it downloaded XAML. Find it easier. Let's go ahead and return to our Solution Explorer, and I'm going to go ahead and add an existing item, which will be the XAML file we just downloaded. Now you will notice that the XAML activity workflow here is no longer empty. It includes a lot of the processes and steps that I have outlined as an organization as part of my nightly build process for my applications. If you notice here, there is a step called Publish Symbols. That seems to be one of the very last steps of creating a build out of my binaries. This might be a good step to put the Apprenda code activity in. Let's go ahead and look at our toolbox here. At the end of the toolbox, we have the Apprenda code activity. You can go ahead and enter that manually by right-clicking and choosing items, browsing, and redirecting the browser to the custom activities folder I showed you earlier that contains our library, and picking up Apprenda code activity. That will allow you to enter a new menu item into the toolbox, and from there on, let's go ahead and cancel since we have it already there, you can drag and drop this code activity into the workflow. So close some of these windows here so we can make this bigger. Now this code activity has a few properties that are of very big importance. When we coded that activity at Apprenda, we entered a set of parameters, 8 to be exact, that allow us to identify the application you're building in TFS and map it to an application in Apprenda. You can see these parameters here on the right. Now, in the interest of time, instead of re-entering all this data, I'm going to go ahead and show you a XAML file that's already pre-populated and has all these parameters entered in and mapped to arguments for the workflow activity. As you can see here, this is completely filled out. On the right side, we have our 8 parameters, and each one of them is mapped to an argument in the workflow. So we have ACS path that's mapped to ACS path, cloud alias mapped to cloud alias. On the left side is the arguments that are being passed to the workflow activity, and on the right side are arguments that are passed to the workflow. If you wanted to see the arguments to the workflow, they're right here on the bottom left. Let's scroll down and you can see all of the arguments for this specific workflow, which is the TFS build template with Apprenda XAML. So here, let's take a look at the first one, Apprenda root URL. This one is saying that the direction is in, meaning it's an input parameter of type string, and the default value is enter the full URL path to the Apprenda installation. So what we're doing is we're providing a user-friendly string to the person that's going to kick off the build so they can know what kind of parameters to put into this particular variable. Same thing goes for username. Enter the user account with credentials to deploy an application to Apprenda. Application alias. Enter the application alias that corresponds to this Visual Studio solution, and so on and so forth. Now, as an end user that's looking at this build definition, it would be very useful for me to have all of these Apprenda parameters grouped together. To enable that, we have gone ahead and modified the metadata parameter of this workflow. Let's go ahead and open up the collection here. If you were to scroll down all the way to the bottom, you will find the 8 parameters that are going to go directly to the code activity, and each of these parameters has a display name as well as a category called Apprenda. So we have categorized each one of our 8 parameters under Apprenda for the end user to easily find them and easily populate them with the right data for Apprenda. So 2 things have happened here. We have mapped the Apprenda code activity, each one of its parameters, to an argument to the workflow. We have inserted the code activity in the right place in the entire build process, and we have grouped each one of its arguments in a nice way so the build definition can find them easily and easily populate them so that the build can execute and appropriately map the Apprenda application to this TFS build process. Let's take a look at a completed TFS build template with Apprenda. Here, as you can see, we have our Apprenda section again, and each one of these parameters is completely filled out. Let's go through them one by one. The first one are additional ACS build parameters. ACS.exe, the executable I showed you earlier, is the executable that allows you to run command line actions against an Apprenda installation. In this case, we're passing a couple of specific parameters to it, namely the private root of the application that we're building. Each of these build definitions can only be mapped to a single Apprenda application, and this is very important. Because some of these settings are application specific, you have to create a separate build definition for each Apprenda application. However, you could reuse the same build process template across many applications. The second parameter here is the alias of our application, which was the application I showed you at the beginning. The next one is the URL to our Apprenda installation, then alias for the cloud. If we're part of multiple development teams, the alias for that development team, the relative path to ACS.exe, the password for our Apprenda installation, as well as the username. Now, all of these settings allow you to uniquely map this particular ASP.NET project to an Apprenda application. The project is defined here up on top. So this is the project we're building. It's called ASP.NET App.sln, and we're mapping that to the time card TFS application. Now that I've shown you all that, let's go ahead and modify this project and kick off a new build and see what this looks like. Before I do that, I'm going to go to source control and undo all the pending changes that I've made. I don't really want to keep that new TFS workflow demo file that we've created earlier. So I went ahead and removed that. Let's go to our login HTML file here for our application. I'm going to go ahead and put some text here, and we're going to call it demo 2:54 a.m. and it's demo for Apprenda and TFS better together. Go ahead and save this file, and I'm going to go ahead and check it in to TFS. Now that it's checked in, I can go to my build definition and I can kick off a brand new build that most hopefully will incorporate the changes I have just made. Let's go ahead and queue a new build here. The build definition is the definition you saw earlier. There's no changes to that. So we're queuing a new build, and build 96 has just started. Now, one of the things you can notice here is that under the triggers of the build definition, I have defined this build to run on a nightly basis or daily basis at 11 a.m. daylight time, my local time. But I could also choose to run a continuous integration where we build after every check-in, can do gated check-in, rolling builds, or even manual. This is completely at the hands of the organization and based on the different build processes that they have established. Now, under the covers, our application is going to be built using MS Build, and after that, it's going to go through all the different workflow steps that were outlined in the XAML file I showed you earlier. Let's go ahead and take a look at a build definition that happened to be incorrect on purpose to show you what the failures look like. So I opened up this build that I did earlier, and I'm going to go ahead and view the log here. And you notice that we have a very verbose log as part of the Apprenda code activity. We're showing you all the different commands that we're going to execute. We show you the different parameters that are being passed to the activity. And after that, we start executing each one of those commands. One of them is to register the cloud, and the next one is to log into the cloud we just registered. And that failed. I actually given it on purpose the wrong password to show you that the failure here in the TFS integration with Apprenda would also fail your build. So in this case, the login failed for my user, and that caused an error to be kicked off to the entire TFS build process, and that caused the TFS build process to be only partially succeeded until you illustrate here that Apprenda failed in our custom build activity because of an error code. Let's take a look at one that was successful here to see the difference. So open up the view log here, and again we're seeing the different parameters passed in. We're putting into verbose comments here all the different PowerShell commands that we're executing that are really kicking off acs.exe, the binary I've shown you right from the beginning. And let's take a look at the different steps that this workflow activity is executing. The first one is to register the cloud, and it's giving it the URL of the Apprenda installation that we need to look at. The second step is to connect to the cloud using the username and the password we've given you. The third step is to use the solution file to our Apprenda application and build the Apprenda package out of it. Apprenda package is really a zip file with a well-defined structure of where to find the data for the different tiers of your application. Once the zip file is created, we can go ahead and create a new version for our application and upload that zip file or the Apprenda package to that version. The new version will be created in the sandbox stage, and these are the different steps and output that's coming out of Apprenda. And last but not least, we go ahead and disconnect for the cloud. Now, our latest build did finish successfully, and this is build 10 for the day. One of the things we can do here is we have our Apprenda Explorer on the left side. Let's go ahead and refresh that. One of the things you notice is that we created a brand new version for our timecode TFS application called TFS Build and Release to Apprenda with a date.10. So we mapped the build definition that executed and created the build of our application to the actual version of our app that was created in Apprenda. That makes it easy to find everything and be able to map a TFS build to a version in Apprenda. You can go ahead and launch it here. I'm only launching it to copy the URL here. I'm going to go ahead and close it. I don't want to really launch it there. So I'm going to launch it in Internet Explorer. And what we'll see here, hopefully, is we'll see our modified changes to our application. It's just a simple ASP.NET application that includes the text we indicated earlier that was built by TFS and published into Apprenda. Now remember, as we mentioned earlier, one TFS build process, one TFS build definition can only map to one application. So if you have a lot of Apprenda applications, you need to duplicate your TFS build definition, but the actual workflow that's doing all the work for your application can be shared across multiple of those build definitions. And here our application is loading after it was instantiated in Apprenda, and we'll see here the text we entered earlier. Apprenda and TFS better together. So in recap, what did we do? We have an Apprenda application that's utilizing Visual Studio to develop it. It's utilizing TFS as the overall application development lifecycle solution. We're building our application on a nightly basis using TFS, and using the Apprenda integration to TFS, we're automatically publishing a new sandbox version of our application as part of the nightly build, so that our application is up and running on Apprenda without any additional steps, and we can use that app to verify the correctness of our application, to run any automated tests against it, and make sure that our nightly builds are producing not only binaries, but a running version of our application. Thank you so much.